Okay, so this is Joe Clark's house, who was the person that helped Earl Carter take care of the farm, and there's some information here. The nearest house to ours between the barn and the main road was the home of a special family. Joe Clark was in charge of the barn, the mules, the horses, the equipment and harness, and rarely worked in the field. For me and the other boys, he seemed to be in charge of everything. Oh, that's nice. And there's a quote there. Whenever both my mother and father were away from home, I stayed with Jack and Rachel, his wife. Perhaps because of this, I felt at ease in the homes of other black families in the neighborhood. My childhood world was really theirs. Wow. So that's Joe Clark's house, and he took care of a lot of the farm. I guess there was so much going on here that Jimmy Carter's father couldn't do everything. So I'm going to go take a look at his house. Joe Clark. So this is his front porch. I'm going to take a look at Joe Clark's house.
Catfish and bass, which we call trout, misnamed by our European kin, or mine at least. I knew that Rachel's folks were brought themselves to be my people's slaves. The swamps and woodlands came alive for me. She taught the way that every person craves to learn. Our creels were empty flour sacks that kept our cats in water, fresh and safe, from water snakes and snapping turtles that would have left us bones instead of fish. Rachel used exactly 7 poles, for reasons I could never figure out. I asked her, why not 8 or 6? She only smiled at me, then went ahead and caught with lark or squirrel 5 fish to one of mine. She made it seem a favor heading home, and some of hers would wind up in my side. Those might have been the best days I have known. With my folks gone, I'd stay with her and Jack. Newspaper walls all gleaming, the sagging doors stayed open, letting flies and moving. I smelled the light and the food from the whole floor. Taking care of it,
It's a big...
they always made me feel like I belong. All the food was plain and seldom changed. I never thought our big house down the road was better. They all knew I liked to be with Rachel Park. I guess my feelings showed. In later years, I visited Rachel's home in public houses. Sometimes I'd find her on the village street. Then, still on the pool, her apron sack. I wrote a poem about Rachel Clark, entitled Rachel. My young life, shaped by those I loved, felt the gentle touch of Rachel Clark, our neighbor on the farm, whose husband, Jack, cared for the barn and did the kind of work that we boys most admired. He tended mules and rang the cast iron bell that brought him in to sleep, and later told his time to rest. His wife was small and quiet. Her brown skin fixed her in our segregated world, yet Rachel had the aura of a queen. But somehow I wouldn't let the white folks ask for her to do the chores around their place. like cooking, ironing clothes, tending babies. But she would volunteer with quiet grace anytime she learned the need was real. For miles around, the farming folks would know what Rachel did while working in the field. I took 150 pounds or so of cotton if I never stopped to rest. No man could do much more. But Rachel Clark could pick near twice as much as second best. At sundown, we would tie what we had got in burlap sheets and watch the foreman weigh, see for ourselves that Rachel had the most, and if she had topped her own best mark that day. She'd put a lot more peanuts on the stack, pull more weeds, shuck more corn. No one, in fact, could equal anything she did. These kinds of deeds that may seem small to some were bigger than for us, in which we all competed as our home life was alive. When the work was done, and when a heavy rain made the fields too wet to blow or plow, and open cotton balls too bad to pick, sometimes she'd smile at me and make them think. Then she and I would leave the farm and walk 6 miles or so to reach a stream she knew. These journeys gave us ample time to talk, or rather, I would listen to her words, and she would think a while and then hold forth about God's holy way. How can we deal with nature as stewards of the earth? She'd say that blessings bring on debts to pay, describe the duties of a man and wife, and say the brave and strongest need not fight. She'd tell how praying gave her life a lift, and how it made her act and not just talk, like staying up all night with someone sick. It wasn't empty preaching like in church. Sometimes I wasn't glad to reach the creek. Our bait was crawfish, lizards, crickets, worms, or whatever she would recommend for perch, catfish, and bass, which we called trout, misnamed by our European kin, or mine at least. I knew that Rachel's folks were brought themselves to be my people's slaves. The swamps and woodlands came alive for me. She taught the way that every person craves to learn. Our creels were empty flour sacks that kept our catch in water, fresh and safe, from water snakes and snapping turtles that would have left us bones instead of fish. Rachel used exactly 7 poles for reasons I could never figure out. I asked her, why not 8 or 6? She only smiled at me. Then I those might have been the best. With my folks, though, I'd stay with her and Jack. Newspaper walls all green. The sagging doors stayed open, letting flies and breezes in. I smelled the life that cleaned the holy floors. Saving kerosene, we slept at dusk on lumpy corn shucks, not my feather bed. They always made me feel like I belonged and knew what things were better left unsaid. All of the food was plain and seldom changed. I never thought our big house down the road was better. They all knew I liked to be with Rachel Clark. I guess my feelings showed. In later years, I'd visit Rachel's home in public housing. Sometimes I'd find her on the village street, then still a queen, her apron sagging with a can of beer. She'd laugh about what good times there had been and tell me what she thought I ought to do in Washington, where I was working then.
Boy, Jimmy Carter really loved the Clarks. I love that passage that they have him reading here about his love of both of them, especially Rachel. He would go fishing with her and had all kinds of adventures with her around the farm. And he mentions in that passage that their walls were covered in newspaper. And they still are. Wow. The clapboard siding was the only barrier to the outside heat, cold wind and rain, so occupants covered the inside of the boards with old newspapers pasted on with a mixture of flour and water. Wow, so they use the newspaper to keep the cold out. And I love what he says in that passage, that he never thought their house was any, he never thought his house was any better than the Clark's house. And so this was their kitchen, small, very small. And stove. And it leads right out. And there's the train ready to take the people back to wherever they were going. A lot of them just got off to tour the Jimmy Carter house here. How you guys doing? Hi. Sorry, I have nothing to feed you. Aren't you cute? Say hi. Hi, guys. How you doing? You guys look happy. It's a nice picture of Jimmy Carter and Rosalind. I love this. It says Rosalind and Jimmy Carter promoted tree farming in the 80s. Farmers like the Carter planted so many trees that today more pines grow in Georgia than 100 years ago. With more acres of commercial forest than any other state, timber is one of Georgia's most profitable agricultural crops. That's nice. They've planted more trees here, and now Georgia has more trees than 100 years ago. That's great.